Jason, Barbra Streisand's only son, Gould never had a chance at a everyday existence. As soon as when she was born, the world was already expecting simply due to the nature of his mother. Has spent years attempting to identify who he was not in that shade. Additionally, it wasn't always simple. There were difficulties, a sense of alienation, a feeling misunderstood and seeking tranquilly. It was never really a private life. What actually happened to him then? Let's find out. Late in the 1960s, a straightforward Barbra Streisand picture holding her Jason Gould, a little boy, made news throughout the nation. Outside world, it appeared to be a charming occasion among a mother and her offspring. However, in those years, including commonplace situations from the life of Streisand was viewed as public property. Jason was born in December into a tornado of flashing lights on the 29th of 1966 breathless headlines and cameras. His mom was already among the largest world's stars, as well as his father, Elliot Gould, played a significant role in his independent. Then, Streisand simply turned down a lucrative 20-city concert tour after discovering that she was pregnant. The press referred to Jason as the million-dollar infant, attempting to assign a value on the choice. Streisand profoundly later remarked, "No amount of money, insulted, could never match the significance of become a mother." To her, Jason was nothing, less than a miracle, particularly since she had nearly convinced herself that she'd never have kids. However, from the beginning, Jason never really had a private life. His birth was covered by the media. His milestones made for news stories. Elliot and Barbra were a pair of the 1960s, and even following their split the public's curiosity persisted in 1971. Photographers documented every move Jason made. Make a move. A well-known picture of Streisand on the Hello Dolly set, clutching Jason, a child wearing a complete outfit. Behind them, crew members and photographers observe. It's a picture. Of his early years as he grew up surrounded by filming locations and luminaries, even in the greatest private moments. Later, Jason would say that his early years were everything but typical. "I was unable to leave without. He's a photographer in our face." Recalled, contrasting the encounter with being surrounded by siege. Birthday celebrations, drop-offs at school, even a casual walk-in. The park can turn into a scene. He learned to be careful as a child, around celebrity, appreciating its influence, but also its price. Jason Gould believes that being born into the spotlight was not an option, it was a state at birth. Additionally, even in the warm embrace of a devoted mother, the cameras were always clicking. Even given the flurry of media interest, Jason Gould grew up surrounded by a solid, caring base. After Elliot Gould and Barbra Streisand, Jason, who was divorced, alternated between both residences. Two radically dissimilar worlds, but all supported by parents who actually wanted to keep him grounded because they cared. Specifically, Streisand showered him with affection. She kept referring to him as Honeywell, towards maturity, always willing to share admiration for him among close companions. Barbra put a lot of effort on providing Jason a childhood as typical as possible, but normal meant something different. When the mother you had was among the most, he went to see the world's most famous stars, accompanying her on concert tours and film sets, in the middle of costumes, cameras, and masses. Jason was 6 years old when he made the appearance of Blink and You'll Miss It in Streisand's on-screen appearance in the sandbox. It was a charming moment that Barbra liked, but she wasn't good at acting, anything Jason gave careful thought to till a long time later. Actually, for the majority of his childhood, Jason stayed out of the spotlight. He was creative, considerate, and didn't want attention as one may have anticipated. However, he started in his early 20s, silently experimenting with independent acting phrases. He was cast as a guest in The Bronx Zoo, a 1988 television drama. Additionally, he starred in Say Anything the next year as Ewe, the party animal whose vehicle keys are stolen by the persona of John Cusack. A good time if any detail that demonstrated his actual ability. Then, in 1991, a significant event occurred. Jason, he co-starred with his mother in The Prince of Tides. Barbra directed and performed in the movie, in which Jason portrayed her, the casting decision for the character's adult son that was sweet and personal to each of them. It was Barbra's dream to collaborate with her son. For Jason, it was something, like a fork in the road. He had experimented, and this was the largest stage to date. However, rather than starting a career in Hollywood, it became into his silent departure. Following The Prince of Tides took a break from acting, and almost stepped back from the spotlight, completely. After several years, he revealed regarding the reason. It wasn't the actual work. It disturbed him. It was the notoriety. I dislike it when cameras take pictures in my face. It feels like an assault, he described, outlining the discomfort caused have been following him since they were young. Even being present at the Prince of Tides' exclusive focus of that type of attentiveness verified that it caused him discomfort. Sense. Fame and what goes with it bother me, with that. I was raised there, he remarked, clearly. Therefore, he selected something most unexpectedly peaceful life, far away from dazzling and red carpet bulbs. Jason Gould did this by making unambiguous choice to define his life for individually, not via the prism of his mother's renown, but according to his own principles. He has personal experience with the price of fame and made the early decision that he desired anything distinct. As you move away, he wasn't merely turning down Hollywood. He was choose a course, tranquilly, and privacy. Completely his own. That path to self-awareness was accompanied by one more very personal difficulty. Accepting oneself as gay in a moment, at a time when the world wasn't as open as now is the time. Jason Gould appeared in front of his parents around the middle of the 1980s when he was around 21. To his great relief, Elliot Gould and Barbra Streisand answered without passing judgment, but rather with love without conditions. At home, Jason felt secure and well-liked, something that not all LGBTQ children may rely on during that time. 2, never felt compelled to come out. Since I never felt included, he then clarified, describing how. He felt at ease and natural about identifying himself, at least in this family's privacy. His mom's support went beyond tacit acceptance. It was sincere and profound. Streisand stated in a 1999 interview that she would never hope Jason was calling him anything other than who he is, intelligent, kind, sensitive, and an incredibly good and diligent individual. She stated that the only hope was for him to survive. A fulfilling existence filled with joy, love, and satisfaction, both artistically and personally. Those words convey more than merely approval, but pride, evidence of how enjoyed Jason's presence at home and the extent of his mother cared about the truth. However, if his family served as a haven, whereas the outside world was another matter. In 1991, as it was the Prince of Tides striking theaters, a tabloid publication chose to tack Jason's personal life. They published a phony, dramatic tale saying Iki had wed a man in secret in Apravit event. They even asserted that possess images, none of which were real. Jason was hurt and shocked. I find it so horrible that they might construct a narrative like that, he added. Later, the experience remained jarring. He was publicly exposed at the age of just 24, not voluntarily, but by a harsh creation. Even though he had never been concealing. The notion that another could falsify his information and make money off of it was a transgression he took seriously. That experience cemented his uneasiness with the culture of celebrities. If he ever felt unsure about staying on the show company, this was the time that made things clear. Hollywood, with its cacophony and intrusion, he just wasn't in the belonged. The following years saw Jason wane away from the limelight. That was purposeful. He stayed away from large-scale initiatives and public appearances, deciding to live a more tranquil life instead and in a genuine way. However, that didn't imply he lost his inventiveness. He used one method to process what transpired with him was through narrative. He wrote in 1997, starred in and directed a short film, Inside Out, a semi-autobiographical comedy centered on the son of two well-known actors that the media have exposed. He even persuaded Elliot, his biological father Gould, who will portray the father in the movie. Inside Out was humorous, incisive, and therapeutic. Jason didn't become well known as a result. However, that was not the objective. What was important was that he took back the story, took something unpleasant, and made it into his own thing. The movie performed at festivals and was subsequently included in the collection Boy's Life 3 of short films on LGBTQ people. For Jason, it was a minor but noteworthy triumph. An opportunity to express his truth on his own terms with passion and humor. Following that, Jason kept withdrawing from public life. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, her lives mostly in silence and under the radar, pursuing personal development, writing, experimenting with photography, and constructing a life apart from his well-known last name. Friends that were acquainted with him at this time, he was characterized by time as reflective and kind, someone who doesn't want praise, but tranquilly. Jason Gould didn't take everyone's route anticipated. He created his own. Additionally, for him, Edinyaimiing was the decisive factor. Of all the locations that Jason Gould may have returned after years of absence from the stage, a huge musical platform in addition to his renowned mother very likely appeared to be the least probable. However, that's precisely where he ended up in 2012. Additionally, it was a significant turning point in his quest for acceptance of himself. Jason had always had a knack for music. His voice was lovely, something that his for years mother had quietly observed, as she would hum behind closed doors as a teenager. Doors, as well as Barbra Streisand, whose best singers in history, would take a moment to listen. However, if she ever recognizing it, Jason would yell, "Mom, simply leave." Because of her notoriety, it was difficult for him to take singing seriously at all. When Barbra Streisand is your mother, he subsequently stated, you don't precisely jump into that lane. For a while, music seemed to not his world, but hers. However, by his 40s, something changed within him. I had a stronger need to express myself than my fear, Jason summarized, what ultimately inspired him to go ahead. Thus, when Streisand started her 2012 tour, she inquired as to if he could take the stage with her. And now, yes, he replied. Jason was 46 years old and had never performed, in front of a crowd, live. His first appearance wouldn't work at a calm coffee shop or a tiny space. Rather, it would be at Barclays Center in Brooklyn in front of around 18,000 individuals. To be honest, I didn't know whether I could pull it off, Jason acknowledged. Later, I went from having nothing to enjoy 18,000 people, yet he handled it gracefully. And the heart. How Deep Is Thee was the song they selected, an old Irving Berlin song called Ocean. At home, they used to sing when Jason was a kid. It wasn't merely a performance. A shared memory was created, the general public. When the lights were turned on and when the music started, the occasion took on a certain of subdued magic. Jason had no intention of making an impression on anyone. Later, he stated that it wasn't about me. I was simply arriving to provide assistance and base medium for this music and attend alongside her. It was an extremely personal moment. It just so happened to be before 18,000 individuals. The audience was enthralled. Numerous people were eliminated away the tears. And finally, the cheers it thundered. While performing, Barbra was clearly full with pride. For Jason, the actual. The cheering wasn't victory. It was he felt at peace. At last, assuming his own voice and letting the world hear it. Not as the son of Barbra Streisand, but Ash himself. Something was unlocked that night on stage. In Jason Gould, for many years, music had been a personal reassurance, something he secretly treasured but concealed. However, following his appearance with his mother on tour, he became aware that it was his calling. Over the ensuing months, Jason dedicated himself to writing songs and recording. Music has amazing ability to heal. Numerous individuals have discovered a feeling of inclusion and acceptance. Through music, he then stated to Billboard, describing his reasons for accepting this at last, a portion of himself. 2013 saw him publish an EP of original songs with the same title, which momentarily peaked at the top of Amazon's grown-up modern chart, To and Joy of Barbra. After a year, the A studio version was recorded by a mother-son team, How Deep is the Ocean, their duet for the record of her companion, completing a Barbra's ideal that she had held since the first listening to his demos. Jason went on cultivating his melodic voice, and in 2017 on his own, he published a full-length Dangerous Man as an album that combines covers and originals, such as The Way Tonight You Look. At 50, the youngster who, once shy of attention, he had turned into a passionate and self-assured vocalist. He started putting on brief live performances, frequently in small spaces where viewers were lured to his smooth, soulful voice. His voice, clear but softly reiterating the musicality of the mother. For Jason, this had nothing to do with fame or heritage. I was only concerned with communicating that. Really, part of me, he said. Music has evolved into a profoundly personal way of connecting intimate and profoundly human. In locating his voice, Jason was respected in silence. Not as the son of Barbra Streisand entering notoriety, but as a brave artist to finally let someone into his heart. Since his debut 10 years ago, he has remained loyal to the same principles that drove him out from Hollywood: confidentiality, genuineness, and a fulfilling existence away from the spotlight. Jason, who is currently in his late 50s, lives silently alternating between the East Andes well as the West Coast. He rarely appears in public. Looks. There was one noteworthy instance. When he appeared on stage with Barbra in 2017 at a concert celebrating her 75th birthday. A picture of her head laying on his shoulder, both grinning, turned into a gentleman favorite. However, Jason would rather avoid the spotlight. I enjoy being outside of the spotlight, he said plainly. Companions characterize him as inquisitive and reflective, someone who appreciates reading, traveling, and deep dialogue, as well as a limited circle of devoted people. He hasn't gone back to making films or TV, and that works for him. When he does conduct interviews, usually discusses music or causes that are important to him heart. His private life is still strongly private because he's never been the type to divulge his connections or practices with the general public. Regarding the tabloids, that formerly, with his obsession, Jason Gould is a long-forgotten tale that, in his opinion,